My name's Derrick. I'm 37, divorced, and a dad of two amazing boys, Liam, 8, and Carter, 6. They've got the energy of a double espresso and the curiosity of cats with opposable thumbs. I split custody with my ex, but this year, Thanksgiving just happened to fall on my weekend. Normally, I'd keep things simple. Turkey sliders, board games, maybe some backyard football if the weather held. But this year, I got roped into something else. It started with a text from my sister, Mallory. She's 2 years older than me, lives in a mini mansion with her husband, Greg, and has 3 kids. They're the kind of family that dresses in matching outfits for beach photos and throws $2,000 birthday parties with gift bags that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Her texts are always short and always read like demands dressed up as invitations. Thanksgiving at Mom's. You're coming. Bring the boys. For PM. No, please. No, what do you think? Just a timestamp and an order. But the boys were excited. They love seeing Grandma. So I swallowed my instinct to decline and typed back, "We'll be there." Now, a bit of background. Family gatherings in my house growing up were chaotic, loud, and full of food. My mom used to cook enough to feed a football team, and if you didn't leave the table in a food coma, she acted like she'd failed. But ever since Mallory married Greg, a man who unironically says things like self-made alpha, things changed. The menu became elevated. The tone? Judgmental. And the seating arrangement somehow always made my kids feel like accessories instead of people. Still, I told myself I'd go with a good attitude. I even dressed the boys up in little button-ups and combed their hair. We brought pumpkin pie and a green bean casserole I'd made from scratch. I know that's not exactly revolutionary, but I was proud of it. I don't get many chances to cook something that doesn't come from a box or involve Dino nuggets. We got to Mom's house at 3:58, which apparently was already a problem. Mallory opened the door, looked at her Apple Watch, and muttered, "You're cutting it close." I smiled. "Hey, good to see you too." She didn't respond, just turned and walked back toward the kitchen, calling out, "They're here," like we were the last guests to arrive at our own intervention. Mom gave the boys a big hug, then patted me on the shoulder. Her hair was done up fancier than usual, and she had on this deep green blouse that looked expensive. She didn't say anything about the casserole, just took it from my hands and said, "The boys will eat, right?" I didn't plan for picky eaters. That felt weird. I mean, Liam eats practically anything that isn't green, and Carter lives on mac and cheese and mini meatballs. But I just nodded. Yeah, they'll be fine. When we got into the dining room, that's when I realized what kind of evening this was going to be. The table was massive, the big oak one that only comes out for holidays, and it was absolutely packed. Candles, name cards, cloth napkins folded into tiny turkeys. Mallory had even rented fancy wooden high chairs for her youngest twins. There were these absurd little appetizer plates at every setting with what looked like doll-sized servings of smoked salmon, fig jam, and some kind of foam. My boys glanced at it and gave me a look like, "Are we at a wedding?" I tried to keep things light. "Looks fancy," I said. "Where should we sit?" Mallory gestured toward the far end of the table. "You and the boys are over there." Now, keep in mind, her kids had name cards right up near the center. Prime real estate. My boys. No cards. Just a pair of mismatched folding chairs next to a folding table that had been awkwardly attached to the main one like a limb no one wanted to acknowledge. I paused, blinked, then looked at her. "Kind of out of the way, don't you think?" She smiled, one of those tight, customer service smiles. "They're kids, Derrick. They'll be fine." I said nothing, just led the boys over. Liam whispered, "Do we not get names?" And Carter asked, "Can we have juice?" I promised I'd ask and told them to sit tight. Dinner started with one of Greg's long, smug toasts about earning your blessings. He talked about how he'd just closed a 7-figure quarter, which he said loud enough to make sure Mom heard. She clapped. Mallory gave him this look like he'd just cured cancer. Plates were passed, except not to us. I noticed it slowly, how the big silver serving trays would move from hand to hand, and then, once they reached my end, veer away. I'd reach for the mashed potatoes, and someone would clear them. The turkey came around once, but only the dark meat was left, and even that looked like it had been carved with a butter knife and a grudge. I looked over at Liam's plate and realized he had 3 baby carrots. Carter had a slice of dry bread, not even buttered. Meanwhile, Mallory's oldest was being served something that looked like filet mignon. I leaned closer and whispered, You guys hungry? Liam nodded. A little. I turned to Mom, who was seated next to Greg. Hey, I think the boys missed a few things. That's when she cut me off. There's not enough food for your gremlins, she snapped, eyes sharp and low like she was daring me to argue. You should have fed them first if they're going to be fussy. It was like getting slapped in the middle of a church service. Everything stopped in my brain for a second. Gremlins? That's what she called them. Liam's ears turned red. Carter looked down at his plate, blinking a little too fast. Greg chuckled. Should have known better, bro. We do real portions here. Real portions? What were my kids, imaginary? I felt this tight knot pull in my chest, a mix of humiliation and fury. I wasn't the loud one in the family. I didn't make scenes. I kept the peace. But right then, I just whispered, all right. Then I stood up. Mallory rolled her eyes. Don't start, Derrick. It's just food. But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at Mom. And what I said next made her drop her fork. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw the green bean casserole across the room or flip the table like I wanted to. All I said, quietly, but clearly, was, you're not their grandmother anymore. The words hung there like a crack in glass, invisible at first, until everything started to splinter. Mom's fork slipped from her fingers and hit her plate with a loud clink. She blinked at me like she hadn't heard me right, or maybe like she had and couldn't believe I had the gall. Mallory froze mid-bite, staring at me over her wine glass with her mouth slightly open. Even Greg stopped smirking long enough to actually look uncomfortable for once. I didn't wait for a response. I crouched next to Liam and Carter, gently placed a hand on each of their backs, and whispered, come on, guys. They didn't ask why. They didn't protest. They just nodded and stood, chairs scraping softly against the hardwood as we made our way past the stunned table. Derrick, Mom said, finally finding her voice, don't be ridiculous. I paused at the doorway. I brought food. I brought your grandkids. I brought my time. And you served them scraps like they were dogs. Her eyes flared. I didn't know you were going to be this sensitive. That word. Sensitive. It's the kind of thing people say to make your hurt feel illegitimate. Like being mistreated is only a problem if you're too weak to shrug it off. I turned back to her one last time. You called them gremlins, Mom. Mallory chuckled under her breath. Well, if the shoe fits. I didn't even look at her. I just said, Happy Thanksgiving, and walked out. We got in the car. I buckled the boys in and sat behind the wheel for a moment, hands clenched at 10 and 2, staring at the steering wheel like it might have answers. Liam was quiet. Too quiet. Carter sniffled once and tried to hide it behind the collar of his shirt. Are we in trouble? Carter asked. I looked at him through the rearview mirror. No, buddy. Not even close. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. That maybe the embarrassment I'd caused would force them to reflect. That maybe, just maybe, Mom would call the next day and apologize. But what happened instead told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in my own family. The next morning, I got a text. Not from Mom. Not even from Mallory. It was from Greg. That little performance last night. Pathetic. Don't expect any more invites if you're going to act like a martyr. I stared at it for a full minute. Not just at the words, but at the sheer confidence behind them. The man had laughed at my hungry kids and still thought I was the problem. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, I got another text. This time from my cousin Sarah, the one who lives across the state and doesn't usually come to family events. She'd gotten tagged in a Facebook post from Mallory. I hadn't seen it because I'd unfollowed her months ago to preserve my sanity. The post read, some people thrive on drama. If you can't act like a grown-up at a holiday dinner, maybe you should stay home next time. My kids don't need to be exposed to that kind of negativity. There was a photo attached. The table from the night before. Candlelit, picture perfect, with captions like grateful and hashtag family first. No sign of me. No sign of my boys. We'd been cropped out entirely. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat in the living room, staring out the window while Liam and Carter played on the floor. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a bad day. This was a pattern, a culture, a system my family had quietly built over the years, one that revolved around image, money, and performative love. And my kids, my boys, they weren't part of it. The realization hurt in a way I wasn't ready for. Because growing up, I believed the whole blood is thicker than water thing. I thought family would always be there, maybe annoying, maybe overbearing, but there. I didn't think I'd ever have to protect my children from them. The following week, I kept my head down. Took the boys to the science museum. Baked cookies with them on a rainy Tuesday. Watched cartoons until way past bedtime. I didn't answer calls from Mom. I didn't reply to texts. She left 2 voicemails. The first sounded annoyed, like I was the one being immature. The second was quieter. She said she missed the boys and wanted to talk. But it wasn't an apology. Not even close. Then came the real slap. Liam had a school event. One of those holiday concerts where kids sing off-key and wear paper hats. I'd emailed the invite to the whole family weeks before. Mallory didn't respond. Greg obviously didn't. But Mom had promised she'd come. She didn't. Not only that, she posted Instagram photos that same night from a wine-tasting event at some rooftop bar with Mallory and Greg. Caption: thankful for real family. I wasn't in the photo. Neither were my boys. That was the moment I broke. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just done. I stared at that picture for a long time. The comments were full of heart emojis and compliments. Gorgeous family. You're glowing. So lucky to have each other. And there I was, sitting on the edge of a metal folding chair in a cramped school auditorium, watching my son sing Frosty the Snowman, while trying not to cry. He didn't see her empty seat. But I did. I went home that night and started digging. Not for revenge. Not yet. Just answers. Clarity. I needed to understand how we'd gotten here. I went through old photo albums, birthday cards, emails. I found a pattern. Ever since Mallory got married, everything shifted. Mom stopped visiting as much, stopped calling as often. And when she did come around, it was always with Greg and the kids, acting like my house was a charity project she was inspecting. There were birthday parties she'd skipped, school plays she'd forgotten. And all the while, Mallory was the golden child. Even when she moved into that gated community and started referring to my apartment as quaint, the favoritism wasn't subtle anymore. It was strategic. And my boys? They were collateral. The real betrayal came a week later. It was a Thursday. Rainy. I just picked up the boys from school when I saw the envelope wedged in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, printed neatly. I opened it at the kitchen table. Inside were 2 things, a birthday party invitation and a check. The invite was for Mallory's oldest daughter. Some kind of fancy spa-themed party at a hotel ballroom with celebrity stylists and a sushi bar. The check? $150. There was a sticky note attached. We figured you'd want the boys to feel included, but we also understand your situation. Here's something to help with a gift. My hands shook. It wasn't generosity. It was pity. And not even the quiet kind. This was a reminder. A receipt. Proof that, in their eyes, I was the poor, struggling single dad, someone they could toss scraps to while patting themselves on the back. I looked at my boys. Liam was building a tower of Legos. Carter was drawing dinosaurs with crayons. They were happy, unbothered, innocent. They deserved better. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Broke. Rewired. I wasn't going to fight for a seat at their table anymore. I was going to flip the table entirely. But first, I had to let them set the next one. So I RSVP'd yes. And I started planning. Quietly. Strategically. Because if they wanted to treat me like the background character in their perfect little narrative, they had no idea what the real story was about to become. I didn't sleep the night I got that check from Mallory. I lay there staring at the ceiling while the rain tapped the window, mind spinning with anger, confusion, and a kind of bone-deep sadness I couldn't shake off. Not because of the money, obviously. I could afford a gift. It wasn't about the $150. It was about what it symbolized. They saw me as a charity case. A punchline. A broke, single dad who should be grateful for table scraps and birthday invites. And they didn't just look down on me. They looked down on my boys. That's what broke me. Because no matter how much I tried to shield Liam and Carter, they were starting to notice the cracks. The missing invitations. The backhanded comments. The way Mallory's kids got hugged like royalty while mine got head pats and maybe next time s. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's strangely clarifying. Once you realize you're already at the bottom of their priority list, there's nothing left to lose. I sat at the kitchen table that night, staring at that invite, then at the check, and finally at the faces of my sons, fast asleep in the next room, and I decided something. If they saw me as a side character in their story, I'd start writing my own. Quietly. Patiently. And it started with a single decision. I cashed the check. Not because I needed it, but because I knew it would let them drop their guard. Make them think I'd accepted my place. that I'd rolled over and accepted the dynamic. But behind the scenes, I started changing things. First came the job. I'd been working at a decent company, mid-level logistics coordinator at a regional distribution firm. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. Problem was, I'd been coasting for years. No promotions, no new certifications. I used to tell myself I didn't have the time, or that stability was more important. But truthfully, I think I was scared of failing, of trying to grow and getting reminded again that I wasn't Mallory, that I wasn't the golden one. That fear died the night they cropped my sons out of a family photo. I stayed up late for weeks researching credentials, brushing up on skills, even watching webinars while the boys slept. I applied for 3 remote certificate programs, one in supply chain analytics, one in logistics systems, and one in project management. I didn't tell anyone. I just worked. Slowly, quietly. During lunch breaks, I studied. On weekends, I turned library trips with the boys into study sessions for all 3 of us. I'd quiz them on dinosaur facts while they helped me remember inventory formulas. We became a team, and something amazing started to happen. I got sharper, more confident. And my kids? They started walking taller, too. Like something in the air had changed. The second thing I did was fix the house. We lived in a modest duplex, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, creaky floors, and a leaky faucet in the kitchen. Mallory used to call it cozy, but the way she said it made it sound like a sneeze. I used to avoid inviting people over, even friends. Not because I was ashamed, but because I'd been taught to feel ashamed. Not anymore. I used my tax refund and a couple weekend jobs to repaint the boys' room, retile the bathroom, and finally replace that awful yellow kitchen light that made everything look like it was dipped in soup. Then I found this secondhand dining table online, sturdy, a little worn, but full of character, and refinished it myself. When the boys came home and saw it all, Carter gasped and asked, "Is this really our house?" And I said, "No, it's our home." We had movie nights, pizza-making nights. We built a cardboard spaceship in the living room and used it for missions to Mars. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't curated for Instagram, but it was real. Meanwhile, the rest of the family barely noticed I'd gone quiet. Mom stopped calling. Mallory only texted to ask if I was bringing the boys to the spa birthday party. I replied with a short yes. No emojis. No smiley faces. Just enough to let them think I was still playing my part. What they didn't know was that something was building. By February, I'd finished the first of my 3 certifications. I framed it and hung it above my desk, not as a trophy, but as a promise to myself. By March, I got a call from a recruiter I'd connected with months earlier. They had an opening at a major logistics firm, fully remote, better hours, and nearly double the salary. I nailed the interview. When I got the offer letter, I sat in the kitchen staring at it, then called Liam over and said, "Want to help me pick a new keyboard? Your dad's got a new job." He screamed and tackled me in a hug so hard we knocked over a glass of chocolate milk. I didn't care. We celebrated that night with grilled cheese sandwiches and a dance party in our socks. But none of this was about money. Not really. It was about rebuilding the identity I'd let them strip away over the years. The idea that I was less than just because I didn't have a gated driveway or a private chef. It was about showing my boys what it looks like to stand back up after you've been humiliated. Still, I kept it all to myself. No social media posts. No humble brags. I didn't need to prove anything to them. I was proving something to me. Then came the final step. The party. Mallory's daughter's spa birthday extravaganza. She'd booked a ballroom at a 5-star hotel, hired a team of stylists, and sent out printed invitations that looked like they belonged at a celebrity wedding. I almost didn't go. I'd RSVP'd yes months ago, but now that the day was here, the idea of watching my boys be treated like background noise again made my blood boil. But I had a plan. I didn't tell the boys what to expect. I just dressed them up nice. Liam in his blue button-up with the tiny spaceships, Carter in his favorite bow tie, and brought a plain white box under my arm. No flashy wrapping paper. No big gift bag. Just a box. When we arrived, Mallory greeted us like she was a queen holding court. "Oh, you made it," she said, like she was surprised. Then she glanced at the box. "Is that the gift?" I nodded. She blinked. "Did you want me to put it with the others?" "Sure," I said, handing it to her. "But maybe don't open it until later." She gave me a strange look, but shrugged and walked away. The boys got ushered to the kid zone, which was decorated like a mini spa with robes and fruit water and fake facials. To my surprise, no one sneered at them. In fact, a few of Mallory's friends' kids actually seemed happy to see them. Still, I could feel the tension in the air. The little digs from Greg. The tight smiles from Mom. The way I was seated at the table farthest from the cake, next to a speaker that buzzed every time the microphone came on. They thought I was here to behave, to stay quiet, to accept my place. But I wasn't the same man who left that Thanksgiving dinner in silence. Something was coming, and it was wrapped in that plain white box. What was inside? Well, let's just say it wasn't what they expected. And when Mallory finally opened it, after the cake, after the spa treatments, after the group photos where my sons were once again placed at the edge like afterthoughts, she let out a tiny gasp. Mom leaned in. Greg frowned, and I just sat back in my chair, smiling, because the moment of reckoning had finally begun. Mallory's perfectly manicured fingers hovered over the plain white box like it might bite her. She'd already unwrapped diamond-studded bracelets from family friends and a full-sized iPad from one of Greg's coworkers. So when she picked up my nondescript package, no ribbons, no logo, no pastel pink wrapping to match her party aesthetic, she looked like she was handling a raw potato in a fine china shop. From Derrick, she announced to no one in particular, but loud enough for Mom and Greg to hear. I watched from across the ballroom as she peeled back the lid. Her smile froze before it fully formed. Mom leaned over her shoulder to look inside, and immediately went pale. Greg, still chewing on some overpriced hors d'oeuvre, furrowed his brow and said, "What's that?" Mallory's voice came out a little thinner than usual. It's just photos." But they weren't just photos. Inside the box were 104 by 6 prints, each one carefully selected from family albums, school events, holidays, and birthday parties over the years, and every single one showed my sons being quietly excluded. One had Liam sitting alone at the end of a table while Mallory's kids opened presents. Another showed Carter behind a group photo where everyone else was wearing matching shirts. In another, Mom held up Mallory's baby shower cake while I stood awkwardly in the background, half cropped out, holding a gift. And at the very bottom of the box, there was a note, handwritten in thick black ink. "You erased them. I just wanted you to see what that looked like." Mallory slammed the lid shut like she could undo what she saw. Her cheeks flushed pink, not from shame, but from panic. Mom blinked fast, like she was trying to reset the moment. Greg leaned forward, trying to get a better look, but Mallory snapped, "It's private." I stood slowly and crossed the room, ignoring the dozens of pastel-clad guests and the ridiculous Spa Day Princess banner above the cake table. The music dimmed for a second, probably just a coincidence, but the timing felt divine. "Everything all right?" I asked, casually, as if I didn't know exactly what I'd just unleashed. Mallory opened her mouth, probably to hiss something, but Mom beat her to it. "That was cruel," she said, quiet and stiff. I tilted my head. Cruel? Compared to what exactly? She didn't answer. Greg, on the other hand, scoffed. "That's real mature, man. Making a scene at a kid's party." I looked around. The kids were still laughing in the corner, eating mini fruit kebabs, and trying to paint each other's nails with sparkles. "Doesn't seem like there's a scene. Just a gift. A thoughtful one." Mallory hissed, "You're trying to embarrass us." "No," I said, and I meant it. "I'm just tired of watching my sons be treated like ghosts." And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one, because the setup was already in motion. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't hear from Mom. Mallory went radio silent too. But I saw Greg's latest LinkedIn post, some self-congratulatory blurb about cutting out toxic influences to protect your peace that got way too many clapping emojis from guys named Chad. I didn't care. I had bigger things brewing. You see, the photos were just a spark, a reminder. But the real fire? That would take precision. I'd spent the last few months becoming someone they didn't expect, someone they underestimated. And that was my biggest advantage. It started with connections. A guy I knew from the new job, let's call him Will, had a background in corporate investigations. Over lunch one day, I told him about my sister's husband, about how Greg bragged constantly about insider deals, tax loopholes, and creative accounting. I kept it light, like I was just venting. But Will's ears perked up. "Wait," he said, "Greg Hartwell? From Hartwell and Blythe." I nodded. "You know him?" "Unfortunately," he said, stabbing his fork into his salad. We looked into his company last year. Really shady. But he's slippery. Nothing stuck. My stomach fluttered, but I played it cool. What would you need to take another look? Will smiled. Just a breadcrumb. So I started collecting crumbs. I scrubbed through Greg's social media, the brags, the business trips, the vaguely worded captions about client perks. I found a few key posts that didn't match up with company press releases. Then I remembered a Thanksgiving 2 years ago when Greg had bragged about charging a $4,000 dinner to a client's expense account at a restaurant that had already closed down. I pulled the photo from Mallory's old Facebook album. There he was, holding a wine glass with the caption, "Grateful for new beginnings and client generosity, wineglass briefcase, #blessed." I passed it all to Will. "Leave it with me," he said. Meanwhile, I started phase 2, fixing the narrative. I hadn't spoken much to the extended family in years, not because I didn't want to, but because Mallory had this way of monopolizing the family chat, directing conversations, and subtly excluding anyone who didn't bow to her worldview. But I still had a few numbers, and I still knew how to tell a story, so I reached out to a few cousins, one at a time, not to gossip, just to reconnect. I asked about their kids, their jobs, their lives. And when they asked about mine, I told them the truth. Softly. Honestly. I guess we've been a little distant lately, I'd say. I've just been focusing on the boys. They've had a hard time feeling like they're part of the family. No drama. No accusations. Just facts. And sure enough, the story started trickling back. Wait, they didn't invite you to the family brunch last spring? I thought Mallory said you were out of town. I remember asking where your kids were at the reunion. She said something about you pulling back. Each time, I just nodded. Yeah, that sounds about right. Then came phase 3, the event. I decided to host my own gathering. Not a pity party. Not a counterattack. Just something real. I booked a space at a local park, the nice one with a pavilion and a playground right next to the duck pond. I kept it simple. Barbecue, games for the kids, an open invite to any family who wanted to come. No frills. No spa theme. Just food, music, and space for people to talk. I didn't push it. I sent out the invite with a photo of Liam and Carter holding a sign that said, "Come hang with us," and left it at that. Mallory didn't respond. Neither did Mom. But you know who did show up? Cousin Sarah and her 2 kids. Uncle Rob, who brought his famous ribs and enough soda to drown a moose. Aunt Delia, who hadn't come to a family function in years but said she was sick of the princess parties. By the end of the afternoon, we had nearly 30 people there. And for the first time in a long time, I watched my boys run around, play tag, laugh with kids who actually saw them as equals. No one asked where Mom was. No one needed to. I took photos, not for revenge, but for memory. And when Carter came up to me and said, "This is the best party ever, Dad," I realized something. We didn't need their table anymore. We had our own. 2 weeks later, Will texted me. "You were right. We've got enough. It's just a matter of when we pull the pin." I stared at the message, heart pounding. Because this wasn't about dinner anymore. It wasn't about a few snide comments or being left out of photos. This was about respect, about principle, and about letting people earn their consequences. But I wasn't ready to drop the hammer just yet. I needed one last move. Something poetic. Something they wouldn't see coming. And as luck would have it, the perfect opportunity was already on the calendar. Mom's 65th birthday party. A big one. Mallory had been planning it for months. Fancy restaurant, private event, catered dinner. The whole thing was meant to be a celebration of legacy, with speeches, videos, and a slideshow of family memories. And somehow, despite everything, I got an invite. Liam asked, "Are we going?" I looked at the envelope. Heavy, cream-colored, sealed in wax. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I think we are." Because sometimes, the best way to end a story is by letting them hear it for themselves, right in front of everyone. The night of Mom's 65th birthday started like a scene out of one of those family movies where everything looks perfect on the surface, but you just know something's about to blow. It was held in a private banquet room of an upscale downtown restaurant. Chandeliers, fresh orchids at every table, soft jazz in the background, and waiters wearing gloves that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Mallory and Greg had spared no expense and made sure everyone knew it. There was a red carpet rolled out at the entrance, complete with a fake backdrop branded with M65 in gold script like it was a movie premiere. The guests, distant relatives, family friends, and Greg's corporate buddies, mingled in cocktail attire while sipping champagne. We arrived right on time. Liam wore his navy blazer, and Carter wore his favorite silver clip-on tie that made him feel like a lawyer from TV. I wore a charcoal suit, not flashy, but clean, and carried a small black flash drive in my coat pocket. Mallory spotted us the moment we walked in. Her eyes scanned us like we were a surprise audit. She forced a tight smile. "You actually came," she said. "Brave." I smiled back. "Wouldn't miss it." Mom was standing near the front, bathed in attention, holding a glass of wine. Her eyes met mine for a moment, and something flickered behind them. Not warmth, not guilt, just a wary sort of curiosity. I nodded politely and guided the boys toward our assigned seats. Table 11, tucked in the back, near the kitchen. Of course, the kid table, with 2 extra chairs hastily jammed in. I didn't react. I just took my seat, adjusted my cuffs, and waited. Dinner began. A 5-course ordeal that included some sort of beet foam and a main dish that I'm still not convinced wasn't just chicken in disguise. Speeches followed. Greg started with a 10-minute monologue about building legacy and how family is the foundation of every empire. Mallory gave a slideshow presentation next, with soft piano music and sepia-toned photos of Mom holding her grandkids. Every photo featured her kids, smiling, laughing, hugging Grandma like a Norman Rockwell painting. My boys. Not one shot. Not even the birthday where Liam gave Mom a hand-drawn card that took him 3 days to make. She closed the slideshow with, "To Mom, the heart of our family, thank you for always showing up." The audience clapped politely. Some nodded misty-eyed. That was my cue. I stood up. Mallory blinked. "Derrick?" she said, like I'd stood at the wrong moment during a church service. I smiled. I asked the event coordinator if I could say a few words. She said yes. Mallory's eyes narrowed. "We already wrapped the speeches. It'll be short," I said, stepping toward the front before she could stop me. Mom shifted in her seat, visibly uncomfortable. I took the mic, looked out over the sea of manicured faces, and said, "Thank you all for being here to celebrate our mom. 65 years is no small feat, and she's certainly built something impressive." Mallory beamed. "But tonight, I'd like to share a different kind of slideshow." A few heads tilted. Someone laughed nervously. I held up the flash drive. "This one isn't about glossy memories. It's about what's left out of those memories. It's about 2 little boys who call her grandma, who've been left off tables, out of pictures, and out of birthday invitations, not by accident, but by design." Gasps. Shuffling. Mallory rose halfway from her seat. "Derrick, turn it off." But the AV tech had already plugged it in. The screen behind me lit up. Photo after photo flashed across the screen. My sons, sitting alone at family events. Their names missing from place cards. My casserole shoved to the back of the Thanksgiving table. The infamous cropped photo from last year, where you could still see Carter's elbow at the edge of the frame. I let it roll for 30 seconds before clicking to the final slide. It was a video. The school play. Liam, dressed as a tree, delivering his one proud line while Mom's seat sat empty in the front row. Silence followed. I let the mic hang in the air for a beat, then said, "I'm not here for an apology. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because pretending everything's fine is what got us here in the first place. So I thought, for once, let's not pretend." Then I walked back to my seat. No music, no applause, just stunned silence. Mallory was frozen, lips parted like she was still buffering. Greg's face had turned a shade of maroon I didn't know existed. Mom just stared at the screen, her wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. I didn't stay much longer. I stood, gathered my boys, and told them, "Let's go get ice cream." As we walked out, the whispers began. One older cousin whispered, "Good for him." Another guest said, "I always wondered why we never saw his kids." I didn't look back. The fallout came fast. The next day, I woke up to 47 text messages. From Mom, Mallory, Greg, even some relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Mom's were the usual mix of guilt-flavored justifications. "You blindsided me. That wasn't fair. You made a scene." But my favorite was her last one. "I didn't realize how far apart we'd grown." To that, I replied simply, "You didn't grow apart. You just walked away." She didn't respond. Mallory's messages were more dramatic. "You're sick. You humiliated our mother. You just blew up your whole reputation because you can't handle being less successful. Less successful. That word hung in the air for a moment, until the next domino fell. Greg's LinkedIn post vanished. Then his profile. Then came the email from Will. They opened an internal investigation into Greg's firm. Turns out your breadcrumbs led to a full-blown feast of fraud. Turns out, Greg had been expensing luxury vacations as team-building retreats and routing client funds into shell companies he controlled. Sloppy stuff. The kind that only goes unnoticed when you're arrogant enough to believe no one's watching. Within 2 weeks, his name disappeared from the partner page on Hartwell and Blythe's website. By month's end, they'd scrubbed his bio entirely. I didn't celebrate. Not openly. But I'll admit, I slept well. As for the rest of the family, the silence was loud at first. Some cousins distanced themselves. A few reached out, cautiously, like they were checking if I still had a bomb vest under my suit. But over time, something shifted. People started inviting me to things. Liam got birthday invites. Carter got Christmas cards. Uncle Rob called and asked if we wanted to join a family fishing trip this summer. Just the guys, he said. No drama. Even Aunt Delia sent me a thank you note. Handwritten. Said she hadn't felt seen in years. Mallory and Mom. They haven't spoken to me since. And that's fine. Not every bridge needs to be rebuilt. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself and your kids is to let the old house burn and build something better with the ashes. A few weeks ago, Liam asked me why we don't see Grandma or Aunt Mallory anymore. I paused, then said, because some people only love you when it's convenient. And we deserve better than that. He thought about it, then nodded and went back to building his Lego spaceship. Last night, we had dinner at our little refinished table. Homemade lasagna, chocolate chip cookies, laughter, no fancy place cards, no name tags, just love. And for the first time in years, I felt full, truly full, because I didn't just stand up for myself. I showed my sons what it means to have dignity, to draw a line, to say, this is enough. And this time, they heard me. Every word.